what if I told you that being consistent just isn't enough? In fact, your consistency might be the very reason that you're still stuck, because consistency is meaningless if you are consistently trash. Merely turning up is just not enough. Yes, you might feel like you're on the grind. Yes, you might feel like you are building something that is actually worthwhile. But the problem is that focusing too heavily on attendance and completion can often make you blind to the actual quality of the output. You know, we want quantity and quality. And so yes, aim to have a quota, aim to stay consistent and get enough work done. You know, I aim to post a certain number of videos a week. What I will not do is fall into the trap of having an over-reliance, a blind sense of faith that I will succeed just because I turn up. Because that can actually be quite damaging. You know, nobody owes me anything. I shouldn't feel entitled to inevitable success just because I do the bare minimum required. And you know, like all ideas that circulate the internet, the ones that gain traction often do so because they sound attractive, shiny, and comforting. And so in this case, everybody wants to hear that all they need to do is just keep turning up every day, and one day success will just fall into their lap. They want to hear this because it validates their behavior, it validates their habits, and the possibility that they might not need to change that much at all. You know, when you hear this advice, it almost feels like relief, you know, that, oh, that's just what I needed to hear. I just got to keep going and then I'll surely be successful. And I'm not knocking it too much because maybe it does reduce your anxiety, maybe it gives you a surge of motivation. But the problem is that it also gives you a false sense of security, because the reality is that persistence alone will not make you successful, and claiming otherwise is an omission of the truth. Yes, consistency is important. Yes, you do need to turn up every day, but that is not enough. That is the standard. And again, the people telling you this, they might not be inherently manipulative, you know. It's just human nature. People want to hear a noble lie. People want something to cling to have blind faith in. You need to actually analyze whether you're on track or not. You know, take time out to step back and actually look at what it is that you're producing. Are you consistently improving, or are you just consistently producing mid? The point is that you can't improve without refinement. You need to switch your brain on from time to time and actually study your own output. Practice does not make perfect. It is perfect practice that makes perfect, I think is the quote. I feel like we need the periods of long focus where we are just flowing, you know, brain dumping and actually getting stuff done. But we also need periods where we sort of actually lean forward in our seats and switch on. Time to read over our work 4 or 5 times. Periods where we go away and research. We need instances where we go to somebody and ask them to look over our work and see where it is that we can improve. You know, we need refinement. We need to be getting better. And refinement isn't new, you know. Painters and artists, they all step back and look at their work from different angles and distances to gauge whether they're on the right track or not. Bodybuilders will track their PBs, they will track their body weight every day. You know, writers edit, even athletes watch their film and they analyze their movements. You know, everybody who actually gets good at something takes time out to stop doing the thing and to actually study the thing. And so you as the viewer, you could take some time out too, bro. Find the downtime where you can look back at your systems, you know, find time to journal or to meditate. Actively carve out time dedicated for introspection. Because let me tell you, if I don't take the time out to reflect or to journal, I'll find that I slowly drift into routines and mindsets that I don't want to be in. And the worst part is that I won't even realize that I'm slipping until I look over things properly. Because reflection allows you to refine yourself. It helps you notice the weak points, the areas of improvement. And so you look back on the past few days, you look back on the past week or month and ask yourself, what could I be doing better? How could I make my process more efficient? Where am I rushing and where am I being lazy? Am I perhaps hiding behind the idea of consistency and pursuing a quota instead of actually pursuing excellence? You know, we want Kaizen, and well, I'm not talking about anime, but Kaizen is the 1% daily improvement, so getting better every day. But that 1% improvement, it doesn't happen automatically, you know. It happens only through awareness and through honesty. It happens when you actually take a step back and analyze what you're doing. It happens when you make small corrections over and over again through refining your system. And again, you need consistency, but you also need self-awareness. self-awareness. You know, you need standards. And this always sounds kind of like unsexy, quote unquote, to say, because now I've kind of shattered the fantasy. Now I've put more of the responsibility back onto you. And it might be hard, it might be difficult, but I just feel like it needs to be said. But yeah, to wrap up, success is not just about showing up. And so pay attention, correct yourself, and refine your work, and gradually become somebody whose output is just too good to ignore. We want consistency paired with refinement. That is the secret sauce. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. You know, like, subscribe, comment, all of that. And check out this video here that YouTube thinks you'll like.